Hello and welcome back to the 100 Jobs Project. I'm your host, Katie, and today our guest is Caroline Gabel, who is an international business development leader for Asia Pacific for an aerospace and defense manufacturer. So really excited to talk today about all things selling airplanes, if you will. It's a very big thing, but hello, Caroline.
Thanks so much, Katie. I'm so excited to be here. So thanks for making the time and having me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, so excited to have you. And I should mention too, for anyone who's just joining us for the first time this week, I am long and short interviewing 100 women in different career fields about what they do for work, how they got into their fields, and how their work day to day looks. So if you're curious about my story, you can go back to the first episode and you can find a whole slew of different people in different careers who are chatting. Carolyn, you're based in the DC area right now, but you travel all around. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly to Southeast Asia and then to East Asia. And then I think I'll have the chance to go to Australia next year, which I'm really excited for.
And occasionally back to Belgium too, because that's where you're from originally, if
That
I'm
is,
not mistaken.
Katie, you're ahead of the game. Yeah, my dad's family is there, so we get the chance to go back once a year if we can. And then my mom's side's on the East and West Coast, so we do some trips in the States as well, which is really nice. It's always exciting to get to go visit them.
Yes, well, you are truly a globetrotter. I feel so lucky to know you and get to live vicariously through all of your travels these days, because I feel like my travels have been a little less as of late. I should mention too that Carolyn and I know each other through our Georgetown MBA program. So truly a great network for connecting people, but also, like I said, living vicariously through people that travel more than you do.
Well, I take all your Marriott tips with me, so I get to apply them, which has been really exciting.
Happy to help where I can. Now, you do travel a lot. I actually wanted to just get to know you a little bit through your travel. Do you have a favorite airline to travel?
I've been really getting behind United, and even more so, they just announced that they're having like an upgraded seat, which I'm very excited for. And I never thought I would be that person until recently. But yeah, love United, and actually I'm pretty particular, so it's been fun
Yeah.
to kind of like figure out how I'm going to travel and all the places it connects.
It's really funny that you mentioned that because I feel like just this past week, my husband and I were chatting about United in particular because he was just in Mexico for a work trip and he was, again, flying United down there. And I was like, you know what? I actually love United lately. If you had asked me that 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, absolutely not. I hate flying United. It's one of the worst airlines. But I feel like during the pandemic and shortly after that, they ended up making a bunch of changes that I have loved. And I feel like some other airlines have they need to keep up a little bit.
I would totally agree with that. I think I noticed that too. And, each airline has their own little thing. Like, I love Alaska's service
Mm-hmm.
and their snacks, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, but I agree with you. I think there's been a lot of changes, and I think there's been a lot of like fleet updates too. So, even the experience in the plane has been so different.
Yeah, for sure. And like their app, I really like their app a lot more than other airline apps. Anyway, I digress. Back on the travel front, though, are you team checked bag or carry on?
Okay. So, if you'd asked me this like last year, I would have been like never checking a bag.
Uh
But now
huh.
that my trips have been longer and for further distance, and Southeast Asia has a very different climate than what I typically dress for, especially in
Right.
DC. And we've been going during like the winter months when it's 90 degrees in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
I've been check bag all the way. And also it's great because I get to fit all my hair products in,
Yes.
which is a big part of my like getting ready. So I am definitely check bag. What about you?
Yeah. I am actually lately team checked bag as well, which again, if you asked me a few years ago, I was the same way. I was like, no, never check a bag. I think I did like a Middle East trip for like 2 weeks with a carry-on.
Oh,
And I look back now and I'm like, how and why? Like the convenience of a checked bag is great, especially if you're traveling to places with slightly different climates. And if you have a lot of work clothes that you need to bring too, because I feel like, especially for women, so much of the work clothing can sometimes hinge on having the right shoes. And so if you have to have like several different outfits, it can be really hard to figure out like what shoe am I matching like everything with on this trip.
that's so relatable, actually, because another thing, so one of the parts of my job is going to different air shows and coordinating meetings on the ground and making sure all the right people are in the right place at the right time. And it's a lot of like running around and corralling. You talked a lot about like coordinating visually. Mine,
Mm-hmm.
so like, how do I get it to be as comfortable as possible and like also while coordinating. So
Yeah,
yeah, it makes a huge difference. I'm like short little kitten heels with block heels all the way.
big block heel fan over here. You can pry those off of my cold dead body.
That's what's been cool too, because when I do get to travel, what I try to do is instead of like getting a little trinket or something, I'll try to get something as a sort of like what's local. Like, is there a
Yeah.
local artist? Is there a local designer, something like that, where I can just do a little bit of investment and have like a cool story behind it. And
Mhm.
so when I was in Singapore, I bought like Charles and Keith there, which is a brand that's two Singaporean designers. And I mean, also, it's nice because I don't have to pay tariffs when I'm buying them.
Yeah.
So that's another plus. And so it's a fun way to kind of like have a cool, really nice memory associated with the trip too, while making it a little bit fun.
Yeah, definitely. Are you talking like things for around your house or like clothing items or all of the above?
All the above. It's been recently art too. And so finding little pieces where I'm like, one of my favorite quotes is like, what's, the best kind of art? And it's what I like. And so
Yeah.
it's been fun kind of curating those pieces to like seeing. I think I would say my taste is more maximalist or like pop, lots of bold colors, things like that. And
Okay.
so whenever it's fun to kind of say, okay, well, this is a very unique art style to maybe this region of the world, but it still has those elements and like tying them all together and then getting to share stories about them. So this
Yeah,
is the first time I
definitely.
think I've talked about it. So it's kind of fun.
No, I think that's so fun too. And that's actually, sorry to make this about me, but something similar that like I do when I go different places. And I think it's so fun. And I would imagine that you can relate to this to have things up in your home that you can look around at and that they remind you of this really cool place that you've been and this new culture. And there's a story and you can talk with people about it. It's so fun and so much better in a lot of ways than like a little magnet or something like that.
I totally agree. The only issue is the framing part. I feel like it's so fun doing that. And plus, I think oftentimes I buy them with people. And so when I remember an experience that I had picking it out with someone, I'll send a text to them saying, like I finally got this framed. I was totally thinking of you, or I saw this and it reminded me of the painting we picked out. And so it's a lot of fun. I really love the relationship aspect of it and like using it to tell a story. It's so fun.
Well, last travel-ish question. I always have to ask anyone who travels a lot, your favorite hotel rewards program. Are you Hilton Honors or Marriott Bonvoy?
I recently switched over to Marriott because I think my team is a Marriott team,
Okay.
but before that it was Hilton just because it was out of convenience. But now I think I'm getting a little bit more picky, as you heard with my United answer too.
Yes, yes. Both answers are good answers. Both hotel chains have a lot of great hotels, but I'm always just curious as a former Marriott gal. Okay, now we've talked a lot about travel. We have two things left to get to know you. The first one is favorite, like,
So, China Chilcano in Washington, D.C., and I realize I said that with a very American accent, the Jose Andres restaurant, and it's a Peruvian, Japanese, and Chinese fusion. And if you haven't had Peruvian food in your life, like you are completely missing out.
mm-hmm.
But there's a dish, it's called lomo saltado, which is a like beef dish with rice and vegetables. It is the most amazing thing I've ever had in my entire life. And then to pair that with a pisco sour with a little bit of egg white on it.
Ooh.
If you give me the full hour to talk about just that, I honestly could. It's so good.
Definitely. I really randomly, because we are like super on the same wavelength here. I had lomo saltado at a restaurant in New York just a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing. So I will absolutely be checking that out because luckily your restaurant is close to me. So thank you for the reco.
Anytime.
Amazing. Okay. I need to stop thinking about that and jump to our last question. This is something that kind of gives us a glimpse into what your workday looks like. Would love to know what is in your work bag when you are out and in person.
We started migrating back into the office at my work, which I've absolutely loved because my team's based there and I'm a social butterfly. I do like having flexibility and they're really good about that. With my day being in multiple different time zones, I typically come into the office later in the day. So it typically has my workout gear and what else? I cannot live without my AirPods. I love
Mhm.
music. Spotify is my favorite app. I like will do work while listening to music if I'm not on calls. And then yeah, like 6 variation of earbuds when I've inevitably like misplaced my AirPods or they've
Mhm.
died. And then yeah, pretty much that. And then I just got a new laptop and I've been trying to teach myself how to use AI. So that's been like a favorite of mine because I really enjoy learning. And so I've been having a lot of fun kind of like testing things out and figuring out how I could maybe make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. So you got workout gear, AirPods, and some extra earbuds, and then new laptop for all the AI testing.
Well,
Anyway, great to get a little glimpse into your workday. Let's talk about your workday and how you got there. When you were a little kid growing up, what were you interested in? What was your household like? The heart of this, of course, would love to know what kind of household you grew up in, but also where did this interest for the aerospace and defense industry come from?
I think it's really like core to who I am. I grew up in a household that was really multicultural. My grandpa is from Lebanon, my grandmother's first generation immigrant, and then my father's from Belgium. And so growing up, we always had these different perspectives and we had all of these different I guess, traditions from each of these different parts. And when my dad married my mom and when my grandparents met, they always kind of took these traditions and made their own. And a lot of times I would have to kind of translate what these things meant or even literally translate for my mom who doesn't speak a lot of French. And
Which, real
so
quick, what was your first language?
that's a great question. Depends on who you ask. I probably learned French and English at the same
Okay.
time.
French, English, and then what else is in your repertoire?
I speak Spanish, but I learned that through high school and
Okay.
then living abroad. So, yeah, that was like the whole translating, kind of trying to understand why people were behaving a certain way or like
Mm-hmm.
why maybe I, because of these influences, was doing something then different from other people. And so originally I thought I was going to be a diplomat. I kept telling everybody, I was like, oh, I'm going to do international relations. I'm going to do this. And I did apply for a couple schools on the East Coast and I got in, but what ended up happening was that it was pretty expensive. And I also was able to get into the University of Illinois, and there I was it was just the better financial decision for my family.
Yeah.
And it would have mean that I would have like graduated with no debt. And so I decided to go into business instead. But the whole idea of like, how do you really understand a different perspective and how do you try to work together across different views? Like where can you connect? Where do you differ? Why is that the case? And how do you go together forward is something that like that's really all sales is, I feel like, in a way, and where that business development focus is as well. I never thought I would actually end up in this space. It just happened that I started to realize, oh, I could be doing something similar to what a diplomat does. I think there's a lot of like political context that's not included in my role. It's not my jurisdiction to have that. I
Hmm.
represent a company, so that's where it sort of differs. And oftentimes I'm sure they agree with like politics. There's still alignment there, but it's
Yeah.
still pretty different.
So, no, that's definitely interesting background to hear. I mean, growing up, translating all of these different traditions and perspectives and even language from time to time, I can definitely see how that would lead you to diplomacy in some way, shape, or form. And then it sounded like business in some sense was more of a practical decision. But once you got to University of Illinois, did you automatically know like I am going in to study business? And did you start looking for experiences in that realm, or did you take a little bit of a path to get there?
I did join the university as a business undergrad.
Okay.
And I had a dual degree in international business and marketing. And to be fair, now that I'm like in a degree again after having actual work experience, I think it was more high level. When people say international business, I
Sure.
don't know if people really think about what actually that could mean because you could be
Hmm.
doing finance in international business, you could be doing marketing. It was super high level and it was more so, how do you look into new markets? How do you expand? That's really what I think I learned as well as like how do you structure your business to be internationally focused. And so I started chasing opportunities to find ways on how I could work internationally. That was something that I knew that I wanted to do. I thought that meant for me that I was going to live in another country.
Mhm.
So I actually applied for 2 study abroad programs and actually a couple other ones, but they were shorter term that had me in Paris and then in Barcelona for 6 months each. So I worked that angle of, okay, I can show that I've culturally and, like, competent in working in those spaces and that
Yeah.
I really understand what it's like to be in those countries so that I can convey it to future employers or like see if I can apply and work in those spaces. And it was really cool. The programs that we got to work with, I went to ESCP Europe as well as the University of Barcelona. And at ECP Europe, it was a really focused business school where we got to do consulting work essentially for Coty, which is a beauty brand. And we had to understand or try to see if we could create a project about how we would introduce their products to the Chinese market. That was fascinating. I'd never worked on something similar to that. We did wine industry. We did a whole bunch of different industries. And so that really helped me to understand, okay, like I get to work on all, instead of maybe being very narrow and focused in on a specific type of work, I can take the skill set that I have and apply it to different sectors or
Mhm.
industries. And like I get to learn along the way, which I've absolutely loved. I think still do that in the roles that I've had at Boeing and the roles that I have at my company. Um, because it's so large. I've been in HR, I've been in business development, I've been in ethics and compliance and sustainability. And you can have these perspectives or you can have these general skills and move into those spaces and still be effective if you're willing and open to learning. So I think that's really what I got out of my undergrad is, and now that I've reflected on it in this conversation, it's okay, you learn kind of a general skill set. You're going to go into this environment that is maybe pretty specific, but can you think higher level and can you apply it across the board? And I think that's what's really a really great opportunity.
Did you have any other jobs or internships while you were in school that you felt were really fundamental to maybe landing your first job out of college?
Yeah, actually, I think one in particular that I think helped me think about how do you um, consider a specific project in the context of a greater organization and how it applies. The University of Illinois had a program. It was a student run consulting organization. And it was mostly tied to the business school, but people could apply from other business school or not other business schools, but other parts of the university. So I would be staffed on projects with engineers, with like communications folks, with other business folks. And it was such great conversation to think about like, okay, this business is trying to solve this particular problem. One of them being, does a consumer consider like the style or the visual aesthetic of a large manufacturing piece of equipment when they make a purchasing decision? Which I was like, "Oh, I've never
Interesting.
really thought about that."
Yeah.
And you had the engineers there who were talking to you, and then you had to do this really deep research to really understand, and then you had to talk to customers who were, like, selling it was a manufacturing company who were buying the product and were selling it, like, what were customers hearing? And so you really had to think along the product life cycle and the customer journey to really understand, like, okay, all of these things are the factors that someone's considering, and here's the outcome. And so we had a lot of projects like that where it helped me start to think about, okay, there are other things that I should be considering because I'm getting all of these diverse viewpoints and the research is telling me all these different things. So now that I'm in a new space, what kinds of things do I need to be thinking about to really understand the entire picture? So I had a lot of roles like that. And I think also that's another thing that I think has translated in my career as well after my undergrad.
So post undergrad, what was your first job?
So I was the first class to graduate during the pandemic.
Ooh, lucky you.
Yeah, so there were a lot of, companies that were pushing off their start dates, and so I actually started in a medical practice as their head of operations for a couple months before I started at the company that I'm currently at. And so there I was in a rotational program that I had found out as part of a rotational program, an HR rotational program, which is kind of unique because with that program, you rotated 4 times, once every 6 months into an HR specialty. But I had maybe one of those four actually be in HR.
Okay.
So I started off in ethics and compliance, and I was there for a year in 2 separate roles.
Gotcha. And then what led to your current employer and that job?
My company's pretty large. It has over 180,000 employees. Something they tell you is you can basically do anything you want if you talk to the right people and you build those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I talked to people and I found out, okay, hey, maybe I want to go back and get my law degree. So I was using my time in ethics and compliance to really understand that. At the time, the head of sustainability was also looped into our ethics team. And so when I got to speak to them and hear about, okay, what does sustainability look like in the aerospace and defense industry, that got me really excited. Like the concept of environmental, social, and governance, and how do you create a system that supports like a company and also the people that are part of it. And then I moved into an HR role where I was a chief of staff. One, it fulfilled the rotational program, and two, it took that okay, I'm de-risking the company in both sustainability as well as ethics. There's the people component. How am I taking care of my people? Which is also another way to de-risk like a company. And then I moved into our learning and development, which is how do you get people to feel comfortable to really excel at their jobs and to be as successful as they can be? Whereas the chief of staff there, all of those had like a people, an operational component, solving really tough problems. But I knew something was missing along those lines, which for me, I'm really passionate about planes, the products that my company sells. And I didn't really have a lot of experience or exposure to that. And so while I was trying to make the next decision for myself, I knew I wanted the international component given my background, but I really didn't know what that could look like or how to go about it. I was like, well, what am I really good at? And maybe how can I use that as the basis and get the international component in addition to what I have. So when I started talking to people and had people advocate for me, they mentioned, hey, there's this job requisition in business development. You're really good at building relationships. You've had this exposure across the enterprise. Maybe this is something that you should look into. And I think it really hits the international component. So that's how I ended up in the role that I'm in. It was just people that were advocating for me and were able to see that I could really tie all my experiences together and communicate that and use that in this new role.
Gotcha. So it's more so starting from this like ethics and compliance standpoint, moving kind of to sustainability, and then continuing to network until you reach this place where you're able to do international business development.
Exactly that.
Okay. It sounded like you were working separately at a medical practice.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make the jump from the medical practice to this employer initially?
So I had applied to the company that I'm working for now and had interned with them previously. I had gotten an offer from them, but they were like, we're not sure if we're actually going to be hosting a rotational program
Oh,
given
okay,
the
with the
circumstance.
pandemic.
Exactly. And then they were like, actually, we are. And so we'd be so happy to have you after a couple of months of me working.
So, yeah, it sounds like you graduate, you're essentially have an offer in hand from this company, you're expecting to go work for them. Because of the pandemic, they pushed pause on bringing people in. So you started the job with the medical company, doing some operation stuff, and then you moved into this role with the company when they took back that pause and started letting people come back. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was missing that gap there.
You got it exactly right.
Amazing. Something that I am just hearing more and more as I talk with people, regardless of what their career experience is that thread of networking is really coming through. And if you're feeling like you want to be doing something different, one of the first steps really is to talk with people, just exploring what opportunities and options are out there and, letting that magic work itself out.
I totally agree. Some people are really blessed and know exactly what they want to do. And then I think the more that I'm in the corporate world or even working, more I'm like, you could really want so many different things and circumstances change. And how do you navigate those scenarios? And so I think networking is a really big piece, but also mentorship along with that. How do you learn from other people's experiences and use that to like better inform your decision? You can't always make the right choice, but you can always try to learn more and to really understand what could be a good path forward. So I think you said it exactly right. Like networking makes all the difference, especially if you want to pivot. But there's that other component that I found too, that is that mentorship and advocacy as well, especially when you're maybe considering super brand new positions.
Yeah, I think that there's multiple elements and layers to that networking piece. There's kind of that general layer where you're going in, you're asking questions, you're exploring. And then, like you said, there's that mentorship, finding people that you trust, perhaps that you've worked with, that you can bounce ideas off of, or, allow them to help guide you and help you find your next step. And then there's that advocacy, or I would even call it like a sponsorship piece, where
Mhm.
sometimes you do need people, especially within your organization or another organization that you're trying to work for, who are hopefully a little higher level than you, to come in and vouch for you and say, this person is worth their weight. Let's bring them up and move them into this role, into this position. Those three layers, I think, can really be helpful.
I totally agree. And I think it's also like, how do you build those relationships? For me, has always
Yeah.
been really fascinating. I mean, you see it in the movies all the time. Like someone's taken you under their wing and like all the magic happens like that. I've talked to some people in the past that felt that way. Like, okay, maybe there's a component of that. Maybe some people's relationships happen like that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for me, what I've found is bringing a problem to the table and saying, hey, this is how I'm thinking about it. Like, how would you consider it? Or like inviting people into that decision making process with you. Because
Yeah.
I think even there are a lot of people that I really trust, but up front, I ask them to be mentors without knowing them at all and
Mm-hmm.
using that time to and just like general interest in them and building that. So I think it's always super interesting to hear how those relationships start.
I think, to your point, there's definitely this component of, you see the movies, you see the razzle dazzle
Mhm.
of, like you said, someone is having a bad day on their first day of work and they spill their coffee and they trip, and then the boss comes in and they're like, you are my new protege. And
Yeah.
it's just that simple. But I really like the approach that you take of having a specific problem or question or decision that you're bringing people in to help you with, because people love sharing their opinions. They love helping. They love offering insight. And I think that is a really
Mhm.
good way to forge connections when you don't necessarily have them. So now that you've moved through the ranks and you're in this role of international business development, which really seems to align with what your interests were growing up and also what you studied, it took some time to get there, but what does your job look like day to day?
In my role, it's really trying to identify what the customers want and then translating that back into the company to make decisions that will hopefully meet the customer's needs.
When you
So a
say
lot of
customer too, you're talking about like a company that needs an aerospace or defense product.
correct. Yes, that could
Okay.
be a service like maintenance, it could be like an actual product itself. There are a lot of different things that maybe could be interpreted as such. But yeah, mostly working with them to better understand what they're looking for in terms of a lot of times when we're having those conversation, we're thinking like, okay, what are you going to need in 10 years? There's different ways to think about it. Like, how can I solve for your problem now? Maybe in a medium term or long term. Like, am I designing a whole new aircraft to fit this requirement? Probably not. But if I am in the process of designing an aircraft, like, how would I consider that as a factor that I've heard from multiple customers, so feeding that in. So it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of planned engagements that we have, meeting with customers to really listen and hear what they're saying. It could be a lot of like internal engagements, planning for our next engagement. That's a lot of what we do.
Okay. And just quickly, sorry, I'm pushing you again on the customer standpoint, because you guys are the manufacturer. It sounds like, yes, you're selling products and services, which are more so like airplanes, maintenance services, other things in that realm. But are those customers primarily like airlines? Are they like military customers? Is it a mix of some of those things, or am I like totally out
No,
in left field?
you're totally right. So it'll be airlines mostly. For commercial side, for our defense side, we have procurement agencies that are part of the defense organizations, as well as like high ranking officials, as well as like pilots or customers. I think you have to think about like okay, if someone is experiencing air travel, like who are the people that would be involved in that? Is it like
Okay.
people who are working at the airport? It's pilots who are operating it, or like fighter pilots? It's everything in between. And then just like people who are actually experiencing the flying experience. But that's mostly
Okay.
in coordination with the airline, probably.
No, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Just this is a little bit outside of my realm. So I like to have a baseline for, who you're talking to and who you're talking about. And you're saying, we've got these customer meetings and this and that. It makes sense too that in the aerospace industry, you would need to be looking down the road of what's going to happen, what our needs going to be 10 years in the future, because there are just long timelines and these are expensive projects.
Sometimes, you get so locked into what you know and you do on a day to day. So it's good to be brought back to like a cruising altitude.
The
So I appreciate
basics of
that.
a cruising altitude.
I like to throw in my little airplane puns when I
You
can.
have to. I can't blame you. Maybe actually let's take a second and just have like this broader step of what goes into selling these products and services and where do you fit in that process?
It always starts with the customer. What are they looking for? What do they want? Also, do they have a current fleet? Is it our fleet or is it someone else's? And how does that integrate? So it's really trying to understand what they're trying to get out of purchasing a product from us. Typically, people will release an RFP very similar to any sort of supplier process.
So a request for proposal.
Correct.
Yeah.
And with requirements that they set, what they think they'll need later down the line. And then we'll typically, go through the process of building a proposal, um, and then meeting with the customer to make sure it's refined, as well as, showing them like the capabilities of a product all the way through them like deciding it's the right decision, whether it's like going with another product from a different customer or with ours. And then it's the execution piece, building and executing on building those different aircrafts or providing a service. Sometimes it's sustainment. We offer sustainment services and training services as well. So it's just that whole life cycle. And then sometimes it's updating or upgrading a fleet, like changing the inside of a plane out or changing the capabilities. So there are different requests that could come in. The place where I fit in this entire process is not even like, it's more of the understanding the requirements that the customer has, or like,
Okay.
and so figuring out what they're needing kind of later down the line or what they're needing now, and helping them have those conversations with the right people on my end so that they feel like they're really understanding what we're offering them. We also focus in on maybe capturing those contract awards. Like,
Okay.
okay, the customer has decided that they are going to purchase it. All right, we're managing the process of RFP all the way there by working with the teams that are in charge of maybe proposal building or supply chain, making sure that we're providing a realistic bid or like exactly what the
Okay.
customer's wanting, which can be a complicated process because there's so many different components. So it's
Yeah.
been kind of fun. I love it because customers view us as just one company. We might be doing separate things internally. Like I have to think about, okay, here are all the people that are involved. Are they in those meetings that we're scheduling? Are the topics that we want to bring up brought up? Who else is influencing this process? So it's a fun process for sure.
So it sounds like in this whole process of customers having needs, sending out proposals, following through, and then the final execution. I mean, that's a very big process. Airplanes are big. The teams that are carrying this through from start to finish are really big. And you kind of fit in the first part of this process of really understanding the customer needs and helping ensure that the RFP that your company is bringing to the table really fits those needs and is also executable on your end.
Yes, I would say fulfilling the needs of the RFP that the customer has
Okay.
mostly. So
Okay.
yes, exactly that overall. We're just trying to,
No, that's
bring
super helpful.
everything together.
And this is all primarily for customers in the Asia Pacific market.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So how many customers are you often working with at one time?
I don't know if I've actually this is kind of funny. I don't think I've ever actually thought about it.
Is it more like a, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 20 plus?
The reason why I'm hesitating is because every maybe region that we have different platforms, which are
Okay.
products. That's what we call them. And so we could have maybe one platform that's operating in 5 different countries out of the 10. So it can get a little bit
Okay.
convoluted, but it's a pretty big size. So
Okay.
thankfully, I don't have to manage those, and I have a phenomenal team that is working, like, each country, so I just do more of the coordination across the board and really try to focus in on those key priority ones. So
Yeah.
maybe if I had to take a round guess, maybe 50, 100 at a time?
And some of those you're probably working a little more in depth, and some of them it sounds like you're managing and coordinating and kind of overseeing the process as other people dive a little deeper. So, as you're going through a work day, what does that look like for you? Let's say you're here stateside. What's really happening from the time that you wake up until you are off the clock? Sounds like for starters, you maybe get a little bit of time in the morning if meetings are starting a little bit later for you.
That's exactly right. I tend to focus in on, waking up, hopefully getting my 8 hours of sleep, eating a good breakfast, and trying to work out. I've been pretty good, especially because I'm training for a bike race at the end of May. But that, and then I'll come in, engage with my team. I typically get a lot of emails from the previous night because my
Okay.
team's 13 hours ahead. They've already had their full day managing, seeing what they need, what I can do with, and then looking out maybe a month at a time, like what's happening, and then trying to say, okay, prioritize everything there. Like, okay, do I have to set up for meetings? Do I have an air show that's coming up? Do I need updates on a particular platform or product to provide as talking points? Which is every day is super dynamic, mostly trying to figure out what I'm focusing on for that day and then doing a lot of the coordination and project work. And then I'll probably go into prep because right after that, I go straight into school. Or I manage just different relationships or meetings when everybody's back online in the evenings. Some days I'm not as lucky where they intersect with each other. Other days, it's either one or the other, which is really nice.
Yeah. And definitely sounds busy with school. This is maybe jumping back a little bit from the day-to-day conversation, but what was it with your job that really pushed you to go get an MBA? Will there be a lot more opportunities for growth once you have that degree in hand?
I had this conversation with myself a lot, especially when I was really deciding on how I was going to spend my time, because it
Hmm.
is a pretty big commitment. And what I did was, in a lot of the spaces that I've been in, I've particularly been younger, which
Yeah.
is great. People think that's cool. Sometimes it's not. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I have a lot of really great experience because I've lived and actually done the work. Not to say that I know everything, but I have a lot of really good experiences that maybe have given me better insight into how a business operates than maybe other folks because people have believed in me. So how do I really convey that I know how a business operates? And so that's really what I got out of an MBA. It's a very expensive way to give me that additional credentialing, but it really has helped me talk about that. And what I didn't realize was it gives me, especially at Georgetown, there's the international component. That's what it's known for. There are a
Yeah.
lot of ties with the school of foreign service in a way. You see a lot of influence there in the politics of just being in DC. So it's helped me think outside of maybe the spaces that I'm in as well, because we do a lot of cases. We have a lot of guest speakers from different industries. So I would say those are maybe the two things that I really have gotten out of it and will apply to my job. I think it's more of that. And maybe there will be growth because I'll be more competitive in the job market. But typically, I would say those things and the networking as well would be
Yeah.
what I would emphasize.
That's helpful to hear because there are, I think, a lot of people who are either finishing up school or they've been in the workplace for a while thinking about what can get me to the next level. Is it a degree? And so for people who have come on who do have advanced degrees, I do like hearing that, just how it impacts you specifically. So that's your day to day. I was like, got some time in the morning to hopefully focus on yourself, train for your bike race. Coming in, you're managing a lot of projects during the day, taking some classes in the evening. How does your schedule shift with international travel?
I wish I had a flawless answer for this. I'm still trying to figure this out.
I mean, I guess are you typically traveling for like client meetings, air shows, all of the above?
All of the above, I would mostly say for air shows.
Okay.
And then also for strategy meetings within our own personal team.
An air show, I have never been to one, but I just imagine like a great big hangar with lots of airplanes all around and people pointing out these different cool features. Am I totally off base there, or is that kind of what an air show is?
I didn't know what to expect when I first started, which is kind
Okay.
of funny. Especially with my dad being an aerospace professor, and we would go to air shows when I was younger. So I only saw the public side of it. I honestly learned what a trade show was recently too. But it's like, imagine a whole bunch of people trying to display their newest and greatest products and conveying that. And it's essentially the same thing, but it's in an exhibition hall sometimes. Sometimes
Okay.
it's actually at an airport where you do get to see the product and you can like climb into the planes and talk to some of the people that actually fly them, which is really cool. And then inside, and you're praying that there's air conditioning, like I'm sure any exhibition space, but you get to see like models or different types of engines, or my favorite, honestly, at the Australia booth in all of these places, because there are also other countries that are coming, and sometimes there's like a country pavilion that you can
Okay.
sign up to be a part of. So you get to see like what is being developed in that space. The Australia team has a a coffee bar. Is the greatest thing ever. A lot of times too, you'll see that they have these spaces for meetings, and that's typically the biggest reason why people go, is so that they can speak to other suppliers and to other like decision makers in those conference spaces. It's like a nice touch point to help them ensure that they're making the right choice, or to communicate any changes, or to address any issues. It's just a nice component to be a part of.
To the Australians to come up with something great. Anyway, so it sounds like air shows. Sometimes you're in an airport actually seeing planes, other times it's components of airplanes or models that are fitting in an exhibition hall, talking with a lot of different service providers or manufacturers, and then maybe taking some room for actually meeting with clients.
Exactly that. Yep.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like a lot of your time is probably on the ground when you're traveling at air shows. And are you running that? Are you like actively meeting with people while you're there?
So I do more of like the coordinating to get people in the right spaces.
Okay.
I will go to some of the meetings and try to get some better understanding of what's going on. But thankfully, we have an amazing air and trade show team that takes care a lot of like the planning side, which there's so much work that goes into making sure everything looks customer ready. And then we also have like amazing on the ground teams that are already starting to make sure that we're meeting the right people, or we're engaging with them directly. And so I'm super lucky to be in the middle and kind of just getting everything that maybe is on the outskirts, and then just ensuring that, everybody's getting to where they need to be and having those conversations as well. So it's operational and it's strategic at the same time, but
Okay.
it just depends on the day and how many meetings we have, I would say.
Sure. So you're doing the air shows, a lot of the coordination there. You're also often meeting with your team that is all over the world, and then occasionally some client facing stuff as well. You're definitely busy. Do you ever get any personal time to explore new countries while you're away?
I do. And I love, before this role, I'd never been to Asia. I'd been to Korea for a friend's wedding, and that was an awesome experience. But I really didn't know what going to Asia would look like. And I was really familiar with Europe. My family is there, very familiar with South America. I also speak the language. In a lot of places, everybody always speaks English too in Asia, but I think I had all of these perceptions, and I was like, didn't really know what to expect in a lot of the places that I was going to for the first time. But now that I've gone multiple times, I think it was just all in my head. And I've tried to add a couple days on the back end, especially because a lot of times some air shows can be really intense. You're planning for the whole, I think, 90 days in advance, and really grinding the week into it, and then during the week, because you don't have to work your regular hours, but you also have your job that you
Right.
like walked away from to be at the show. So I try to take like a couple days off and do some shopping, get some art like we talked about, and
Yeah.
it's really a nice way to decompress.
Definitely, especially when you have long overseas travel times. Now, with those long overseas flights, does that mean that you're often working or traveling on weekends, or do weekends kind of get to be your personal time?
I think my team's really great because they try to make sure that you don't travel on a weekend. They're really intentional. Culture at my company is really focused on work-life balance, and a lot of people stay at the company for a really long time, so family oftentimes that I've noticed on the teams that I've been on has a really important aspect of people's day-to-day, and so I've noticed that with this team in particular, we try not to, but sometimes it's inevitable. Maybe you have a Monday meeting or something like
Sure.
that, like an air and trade show starts or has an event that starts on a weekend. You have to be there for that, but typically we can avoid it, and then I just take an extra couple of days if it is over the weekend
Yeah.
to really enjoy my time there.
That's really great to have a company and a team as well, because sometimes the team culture can be different than the company culture, but that values that time and making sure that you get a little bit of time to recharge. I'm curious on that front too, because you have a demanding schedule between a lot of international travel, school as well, but you also have a partner who has a really demanding schedule. How do you approach like being intentional about finding time to spend with him?
Yeah, so my partner, he's doing his fellowship, which is an extra year after residency, and so he's a surgeon,
Great
and
fiance to have.
it is. He's I the amount of medical questions that I ask him on a day to day, I'm like, "Is this normal?" It is very great. I've been very lucky. We were really intentional about how we use our time. Right now, he's in training in a different city. He's in Atlanta. I'm in DC. When we were living together, it was trying to figure out, okay, we're going to be back home at this time. What are we going to be doing together? And how are we spending it together? So we have a shared calendar that we both live by. Well, I live by. I think he just looks at it. And then we
Hmm.
try to do things and make the fun out of like the most mundane things. Like our favorite thing to do together is to go to Costco and like grocery shop together. And we go like row by row. Everything is cyclical with me. And then it's just like, okay, what can we do together to also like get what we need to do done? I'm honestly, again, super lucky too, because he'll tell me, okay, you know you need to do this for your job. Like what we need to do together can take a back burner.
Okay.
Focus on that. So there's an ebb and flow to our relationship too. Like for him, he was studying for boards. Okay, like I'm picking up the load here. So it's a really like take and give relationship. And I think we're both really focused on our careers right now, and we have a lot of the same values, which makes it, I mean, a million times easier.
Yeah, I think that when you're often with the right person too, sometimes doing some of those mundane, I say that in quotes, tasks can like you can still make it so much fun and you can make it meaningful time. And in other phases of life, you might have more time to like actually be out doing activities, but as long as you're with the right person and you're in the right headspace, like any time is good time.
And I also think, like, career-wise too, I tell Ollie about this all the time. I'm like, "I think you have more confidence in me than anybody I've ever met." And, like, just having him as a cheerleader in my corner too when I'm talking about my career or when I'm thinking the next thing or when I'm trying to contemplate, like, what I think would be a good fit. It's like, okay, well, you do what's best for you and what will allow for you to be as successful as possible. And like, I know you, I don't think this would be a good idea because, like, have you considered it from this perspective? So it's also really nice to have that. And I'm really lucky that he's willing to have those conversations with me and also that he listens to my perspective too because he's in the process of applying to jobs. And so I was like, okay, well, I can connect you to my HR person so that you can practice interviewing. Not that they'll know like a lot about your specialty, but it's like the same idea. So it's been fun to kind of like navigate this new normal for us.
No, that's really sweet. And the right partner, I think, will really build you up in all areas of your life too. And I think that if you're with the right person, they will push you, maybe not in like a pushy, mean way, but like just them and how they believe in you will help you want to be better at what you do. So that's really special. Now, when you do get a little bit of time to yourself, what are you doing to relax and take a break?
I've been really into audiobooks recently. I've also been getting back into working out. So I try to really decompress, just extra energy there. And then I would say I love biking, but I also really love skiing. And I feel like the same kind of feeling that I get, it's like, okay, I get to really test out the limits and I get to get out of my head and really think about, okay, I'm really focused on this particular instance and everything else kind of dissipates. And in both of those cases, also working out too, I get to work out with other people. The more I talk to people, the more I realize I'm an extrovert. I really get a lot of energy from doing things with other people. So it's always
Perfect.
a lot of
Force me
fun.
anytime.
You'll be my next call, don't worry.
Can't
Now
wait.
that you said you enjoyed it, you already know.
No, no, that's great. And I do think that working out, especially if you're able to be with other people, really you get the endorphins, you get a little bit of dopamine here and there, but then also just like being in community and being able to unwind and vent and get everything off your chest and have the wind in your face is really great. A few reflection questions and we'll wrap things up. I would love to know, just as you think back about your career to date, are there any achievements that you're really proud of or excited by?
I think the things that I look back and I feel most proud are the way that I've made people feel or feel that they have confidence in themselves. Like a year or two back, I mentored someone and kind of gave them the words to feel comfortable asking for a promotion. And we had conversations about how they would go and do that because it's a little bit of a complex process in my
Sure.
organization. And it was the first time that they were doing it. Just the fact that I was able to kind of like help them and coach them through that and that they reached back out and were able to say like I got this promotion. I spoke to the people that you recommended. Like, I think what you suggested is a great path. And it is something that I'm interested in. And like connecting people to what they want for themselves has been really fulfilling. And thankfully, I've been able to do it a couple times. I'm really honored that people trust me with that. But I think that's so much more fulfilling for me than maybe some of these other components. I would say, yeah, it's really getting people to feel like they're becoming the best version of themselves with the experience that I've somehow figured out, or not even, am still trying to figure out in the corporate world.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. And you definitely are a people person. Seeing those people grow and seeing differences in individual people's lives is something that drives you. Now, there's a huge range of salaries in international business development. I'm curious, given your experience, especially in the aerospace industry, what would you expect for someone just entering the field versus what is like upwards growth for someone who's been in the field for a long time?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company. For
Sure.
ours in particular, we have a really phenomenal compensation package. But for business development and marketing, especially when we're talking about like the scale of your product, that typically defines kind of your salary range. If it's a like bigger product and profits more, you're able to allocate more funding for your employees. So I would say it's a pretty competitive market, which is really exciting. So I would say I'm more of the mid-range, middle career, and it ranges from like 20 to 180 in a mid-tier or a high cost of living area. So it could really range. And when you're starting, depending on kind of like the type of work that you're doing, if maybe you're building relationships with clients, I feel like it could be easily in the six-figure salary. But I
See,
started off in HR, so it's a little bit different for
yeah.
me.
And then I would imagine that, if you have a couple decades of experience under your belt, you could probably be expecting to make several $100,000 plus.
I agree. Yes. And I think in other companies too, where maybe it's a startup or a newer company or maybe attracting different types of customers, there's a lot of that RSU stock evaluation because it's directly proportional to like the work that you're doing. And
Gotcha.
so as you increase in your role as well, there's definitely two kind of incentives there as well, especially when you become manager or an executive.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. It's always great to have kind of the inside scoop of salary ranges because you can find some info on the internet, but sometimes hearing from a real person what a range of entering mid more experience looks like is helpful. As you look back and you think holistically about your life, where you've been, where you're going, what does success look like for you?
I think for me, it's this is a little convoluted answer. I have a bucket list of the things that I want to achieve. I'm really motivated by working with people, by other people accomplishing what they want, but I can be a really competitive with myself on what I want to do. And I have so many varied interests and desires that like I really want to be intentional with how I live. And so I think success for me, I'm thinking at the end of my career, at the end of my life, like what are those things that I want to have experienced? The way I was able to create this was like, how do I think about what are my core values? What do I think are the things that matter to me? And what will that look like down the line? And so for me, it was I really want to have a group of people that are in my friendship circle that are interesting and engaging and kind and thoughtful. And another thing is like, I want to learn a new language. I want to go to all 7 continents. Well, I don't necessarily want to go to Antarctica, but
Fair.
6. Maybe I would be interested in running for office one day. I maybe would be interested in being an executive. And what's nice is it like helps me think about, okay, what decisions do I need to take along the way to really do that and be intentional? And then what's great too is like I can make it whatever I want. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to do this anymore because I've learned it's not as interesting as I thought it would be. Okay, I'm just going to try something else. Or maybe it's led me into a new opportunity that I can add to the list. So success again for me is really like how do you make the most out of your experience? And even if something bad happens, how can I make that a learning experience? How can I turn that around? So it's a very vague high level because I think my definition of success always keeps changing.
No, it sounds like setting in goals and working towards them, but letting there be a little bit of ebb and flow for learning and where the wind takes you in life, but ultimately just being really intentional and finding meaning in what you're doing.
100%. Yeah. And working
Amazing.
back to meet it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing all of your insights and your experience today. I wish you success wherever life takes you. And I think that wraps us up for today. Again, thank you, Carolyn. And if you want to hear more episodes, you can find us at the 100 Jobs Project. We're on Instagram, we've got a website. Take a screenshot, share the show on your Instagram story, leave a review. You know the drill. And we'll see you back next Wednesday. Thanks so much. Bye.